Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's title story, a psycho Karen sends her kid to my house to vandalize my mailbox. I taught her a lesson that she will never forget. Here is what happened. The first one starts like this. My neighbor is a woman that I can only describe as a Karen. I learned this on the day she called the police on my son and his friends playing outside. According to her, a bunch of kids were terrorizing her property despite the fact that they were in my yard. Also, they were all 9 years old and not a threat in the slightest. Once the pandemic started though, I seemed to find what might be the main reason Karen was targeting us so much. I did not think much of being Asian American and how it could mean me being targeted since it never happened before. Once the world seemed to open up more to things like racism and especially blaming every single Asian for the pandemic, Karen no longer hid her reasoning for hating us. She would start to yell at me every single time she saw me outside to go back to China and take my disease with me. I'm Korean, but I wouldn't expect Karen to know or care. She had even told me once that if I didn't get out of her country, she would make me. With all the things on the news of violence towards Asians, I was honestly a little bit scared. I did not want her to hurt me or especially my child. Once things started to finally calm down and quarantine in my area lessened is when I noticed things starting to happen. At first it was small and just my doorbell ringing and nobody being there when I answered. Then I would find my car having raw egg on it. Things that seemed like very juvenile pranks, but I had my suspicion that Karen was behind it. Nobody else in the neighborhood seemed to have any issue with me unless they were keeping their racism to themselves. I did not report any of these things because they were not serious. No officer during a pandemic is going to really care about an egg or some doorbell pranks. Then came the day I noticed that my mailbox had been smashed. We have the type that stands up near the end of my walkway, which is not my personal preference but something the town decided on. It makes it a lot easier for mail carriers than having them come to a mailbox at the front door or even one of those mail slots. It was broken in the middle so it fell to the ground and was then dented. The mail from that day scattered around. This was probably the first thing that really frustrated me and I wanted to figure out a solution. I know that destroying a mailbox is a federal crime, but without proof, I was not gonna get a good case going. Instead, I replaced the mailbox, but I also added a little something extra out of sight. A camera was pointed towards it, so if somebody struck again, I would have video evidence. It took 3 days until my mailbox was once again ruined. I got the camera footage and really expected to see Karen destroying it. Instead, I saw her 16-year-old son walk up with a baseball bat and destroy it. I can only infer that he did it the first time as well. Since it was the second one and I knew talking to Karen wouldn't do any good, I reported the crime to the police. I did mention to them the comments Karen made and that I had a feeling she might have been the one behind it all. I really did not want a kid to get into trouble if it was her idea. The police did a full investigation of the family and found out that Karen did in fact tell her son to destroy my mailbox, as well as pull pranks on me in hopes that I would leave the neighborhood. Now, the son was not some bad teenager who wanted to vandalize my property, it just turns out that Karen was not a very good mother and the son was afraid to disobey her commands. I was not privy to the information of what they found when it came to them. It must have been something serious though, because the son was taken out of the home and from what I understand went to go live with his father. Because he cooperated with police and acted out of fear, he was not gonna get charged. Instead, Karen was gonna be charged for destruction of federal property. I'll admit it right now that I don't know anything about the legal system. In fact, I was confused myself how she was able to be charged for a crime that she did not technically commit. I was not gonna complain though and was happy that she would be getting some well-deserved punishment. Due to her racism and entitled attitude, it was impossible for her to appear sympathetic to a judge for what she had done. Instead, she went on a tirade about how what she did was not a crime because I was not an American. That I shouldn't have had a mailbox in the first place and that I had to get out of the country and go back to where I came from. That I should be the one standing trial for murder due to all the people in the country that died because of the pandemic. She truly believed in her mind that she was justified and I was the evil villain that had to be punished. The blatant racism did not hold up well in court, nor did anything else in her defense. Her only choice would have been to lay the blame on her son doing it on his own. His testimony plus her previous racist rant made any attempt at that impossible to believe either. She was found guilty and I hoped would have to stay away from me. Again, I have almost no legal knowledge about this entire thing, minus the fact destroying a mailbox is a federal crime. That was only because I read a story about it once, so I guess I can thank one of you out there for that. Punishment for a federal crime was out of my knowledge base, so I really assumed she would just get like a slap on the wrist or something and told to stay away from me, but instead she was sentenced to 3 years in prison and I was in total shock. I was not the only one either, because Karen was trying to throw an absolute fit about it. I say trying because her lawyer was stopping her from saying anything stupid that would drag her into further trouble with the judge. I do want to point out that due to the pandemic clogging up the justice system, there was a big gap of time between her getting charged and actually seeing if those charges stuck. During that time, she was still living next to me and I was more scared than ever before of her doing something crazy. We were told not to interact with each other at all, but I had no idea if she was gonna listen to that. She thankfully didn't do anything to me, but instead started telling neighbors that I got her son taken away from her and making up lies. Some believed her, but most didn't, which still made going out a little awkward for me. Once she was found guilty, it became a little easier to explain to people what happened and not feel like I would have more neighbors against me. With Karen gone, I felt like me and my son were a lot safer and I could relax again. Sure, the world was still in turmoil, but with Karen gone, I felt like the immediate threat was gone and the rest I could worry about another day. And yeah guys, I guess a pandemic is a really bad thing, however, it is usually temporary. However, a Karen neighbor might be there for years right next to you. Anyway, if you liked the story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. The next one is a petty revenge story. So I recently broke up with my girlfriend and before we split she borrowed my mom's GPS to help her move across the country for school. Well, it's been a few months since our breakup and I asked her twice to send the GPS back and tell me the tracking number. However, nothing showed up at my doorstep. I know I should have gotten the GPS back on before we broke up. I effed up. Today I reached out and asked about the status of it. Her reply was she lost it. Now I'm unsure whether she genuinely misplaced it, she could be absent-minded at times, threw it away out of rage, she could be spiteful, or is just keeping it. Honestly, after the next exchange I could not care less what the reality was. Me, well, can you send me some money to replace it? Her, no. Originally, I planned to let this go. However, I remembered something. One of her favorite games was paid for and linked with my Origin account. 5 minutes later, password changed. TFA was already set up to send a code to my phone, all of her devices were untrusted. Have fun buying and restarting everything on that game you love. And edit, the game was Sims 4. By the way, let me answer a few questions here. First off, no reaction from my ex yet, we've been broken up for months now and don't talk at all. If she ever reacts, I'll let you guys know. Second, regarding the standalone GPS, my mom had it from the mid-2000s. She keeps it for road trips to save her phone battery and for signal reasons. Plus, it already has had addresses of family members in different cities programmed into it. My ex took it because her phone's GPS had failed on her in the past just from local use. She had a carrier that wasn't one of the big four and it showed often with her signal randomly dropping. Since she was gonna be driving for 3 days, sometimes through sparsely populated areas, and her phone didn't have unlimited data, she wanted something more reliable, so we got my mom's GPS for the trip. We also updated the maps before she left. And the next one is titled Karma Revenge. So this weekend I was supposed to pick up my mom from my grandparents' place since my dad was out of town and the place is 100 kilometers away from our city. My mom has a driver's license but doesn't drive, and since I don't trust my car to leave the city with it, I proceed to take my dad's car that he left at home to go pick up mom. Since I would not be using my own car for the duration, I decided to give it to my girlfriend to go shopping and such while I am gone. So we wake up Sunday morning, we live together, get in my car and I drive us to my parents' place to pick up my dad's car. I leave in my dad's car and girlfriend leaves in mine. I don't even make it out of the city and I get a call from her asking if I could come back since she had been in an accident. I head back since the site of the accident was at the very end of the street we lived on. Once I get there, I find out that once she reached the end of the street, she made a right turn and hit the first 2 cars parked on the right. Honestly, I didn't know how to contain my laughter. I mean, hitting a parked car? No. 2 parked cars? That takes skill. So I proceeded to talk with the owners of the cars and offered to pay for everything. Since my girlfriend was at fault, I had no problem going to the police. except for the 3 to 6 hour waiting time every time you go to the accidents department, but offered to fill out a amiable form. That's something we have in my country, where if you have an accident, both sides just fill out the form and be on their way without contacting the police. I live in the capital city and we get lots of accidents on a daily basis. Since it was Sunday and all the insurance places were closed, I could not acquire such a form, so I proceeded to let them photograph my insurance, exchanged phone numbers and assured them that we were neighbors and that tomorrow, Monday, I would contact them with the form to fill it out. All is fine and I leave for my grandparents' place. On the way there, I contact a friend that works for insurance and he mails me a form along with a reference for a service station that would have their cars repaired in a day. I proceed to call the guys and tell them that I'll be back in a couple of hours with the form and we will get everything settled today. To this, one of the guys says, in his position he is entitled to go to the police, so he'll be waiting for us there should we decide to come. This is where I pulled a 180. I was trying to be a decent human being and repair the damage my girlfriend caused, and this guy wanted to waste 3 to 6 hours of my Sunday because he felt entitled. Fine, at this point it may be useful to mention that I have studied law to a master's degree, have the degree, and have been working at law firms for over 5 years, so I pretty much know the law better than the cops. Karma starts to kick in. I call the guys on the way back from my grandparents and ask them to grab a copy of the form that needs to be filled out for me as well. These forms have a number order on them and first come first serve. They tell me they cannot since there's only one per person. This is BS, I know this for a fact. When you ask for such a form, the cops even ask if the other party is here to give one for them too. Anyway, regardless, I get there after they'd been waiting for about 3 hours and request a form. They had numbers 56, 57 and I had 89. Mind you, each case takes about 20 to 30 minutes, lazy people. So when their numbers come up, I was just getting my form and as they enter the office I also enter and ask the cop, I'm also a part of this incident as it was a 3-way accident. Should I not also be here when you talk to the other 2 parts? The cop proceeds to tell the guys to go out of his office and come back when all 3 of us have filled out the report. Guys proceed to wait another 30 minutes for my girlfriend to fill out the report and then we all go in once she is done. Now we get to the core of the problem, the most incompetent police officer I have ever seen. I'm sure even those among you with no legal background or knowledge will see how pathetic this guy is. People who filed reports, the other 2 guys, one of them did not even have a driver's license because it was his mom's car and his girlfriend filled the report. The other guy had a driver's license and filed his report, although the car belonged to his parents. This is relevant since the only people legally allowed to file that report is either the owner of the car or the person driving it at the time, which none of these 2 were. Cop finds my girlfriend guilty, as she truly was, and then proceeds to fill out the paperwork. I ask him, Officer, do you know the regulations for parking on the street this incident happened on? No. And do you not think it's relevant to the case? Now, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was all gibberish, ending up with, you really dislike cops, don't you? To which I answer, I dislike incompetent individuals in any profession. He ends up getting his way since he was the authority in the situation and proceeded to ticket my girlfriend and hand the guys copies of my insurance to get their cars fixed. Edit, small detail I left out, cop did not take pictures of the damaged cars as is mandatory by law for any case that comes across his desk. He literally has no evidence an accident ever happened apart from the word of the 2 other guys. I'm sure that any policeman reading this would have a field day. Cue the karma. As soon as I get home, I start to do exactly what society and my profession taught me, which is sue him. I filed the lawsuit on Monday and got a date in 4 months. Litigation in non-penal cases is very slow in my country. Usual time to finish a lawsuit is anywhere between 1 to 8 years, depending on how much your lawyer wants to push it. The thing is that she was in fact at fault, and had they just taken me up on my offer and not wasted my time, they would have had their cars fixed by now, Tuesday, but they were entitled, so they went to the police. Here is a fact for you guys. Parking regulations on that street, as any other for a matter of fact, state that cars should be parked parallel to the sidewalk. Not on it, not perpendicular, just parallel. The street has a few apartment buildings, so there's nowhere near enough parking places, so the neighbors made a convention to park perpendicular to the sidewalk to fit more cars. In fact, taking up a whole lane of traffic, but that's another story. The thing with conventions is that it's all fine and dandy until something happens and the police get involved. And then law states you must take responsibility for what happened. So basically there's no chance whatsoever that we will lose the lawsuit, and I will even drag it out as much as possible. I'm thinking I could get it up to 4 to 5 years no problem. Now, another kink is a law that states that any item that is under litigation does not produce legal effects. In translation, this means that until the judge gives a verdict to my lawsuit, the ticket is suspended, so the guys will not be able to fix their cars, not even on their own dime. It is somewhat assimilated to evidence, but at a much lower scale. Also, once the process is over, not only will I not be paying for their repair, they will be paying for mine. My main argument in the lawsuit is a legal concept known as causality link, which applied to my case. It means, yes, my girlfriend caused an accident, but that accident was caused by you parking your cars illegally. If you would have parked legally, there would have been more room, your car would not have been in that spot and thus would have not been hit, regardless of my girlfriend's actions. So basically, your action of parking perpendicular caused the damage to my car. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, this person would definitely be handy to have as a friend, or in this case, boyfriend. Props to him for knowing the law inside and out. Absolutely fascinating. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I think a lot of people can relate to having a bad neighbor, but never really being able to catch them or get them in trouble for the stunts they pull. For me, it was mainly because I lived next to an HOA board member that seemed to not think that any of the rules applied to her. She did not break any kinds of laws, only HOA rules, and yet she would go around and fine everybody for the smallest thing while getting away with it even when she was reported. Trying to get back at this horrible person seemed almost impossible until one event happened. The thing that bugged me the most about her was that she flaunted the fact that she would break an HOA rule. They had it in the bylaws that nobody could operate a business out of their home. There were more fine print things like working from home was fine, but they basically did not want you having customers coming to your house and taking up all the street parking. My neighbor was a hairdresser who constantly had clients parking on the street. Still, nothing could be done, and she was not going to get a fine because she was part of the HOA. Going back to me for a minute, I ended up renting one of those portable dumpsters that you can just hitch onto the back of your car to move it. We had to clean out the basement after a small flooding incident as well as some other odds and ends, deciding it was best to just do it all at once, so we did not need to spend any more money renting the dumpster twice. The morning we got it was the start of a little bit of a weird day, since I had to go and work a double shift. This meant I left the house at about 4 PM and did not get back home until about 6 AM. I was so tired I wanted to just crawl right into bed and sleep. Instead though, I noticed that the dumpster was basically full. This did not make any sense since it should have still been empty, so I took a look inside of it. There was old moldy furniture in it that I knew did not belong to my house. There was also some kind of chemical smell that made me back off right away because I was worried I would get sick from it. I wanted to figure out what was going on, but anybody that has worked a double shift knows that there comes a point where your body is not going to let you stay awake any longer. I fell asleep hard until about 2 PM and remembered the trash. I went outside again only to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the HOA and they were fining me $200 for having a dumpster full of probable hazardous waste that smelled on my property. I was more confused than I had ever been and wanted to find out exactly where all of this crap had come from. I had video cameras luckily, and while they could not catch what happened off my property, they got enough. So, while I was gone, the HOA neighbor had hitched the dumpster onto her car and drove it off my property, and I can only assume onto hers. Then fast forward until the middle of the night, when everybody else would be sleeping, she drove it back onto my property and put it in the same spot. In a world without consequences, I would have walked over and slapped her across the face. I knew very well she was behind fining me for this too. I can only guess the chemicals were stuff used on hair and probably were meant to be disposed of in a proper way. I was not going to take this sitting down though, and instead planned to go to the next HOA meeting and fight the fine. I was also forced in the meantime to pay to return the full dumpster and got stuck paying for an extra dump, but I had a plan for that too. At the HOA meeting, I told them that I wanted to argue the fine that I received because it was unjust. Of course, neighbor started talking right away about how she lived right next to me and she saw and could smell the horrible stuff that I put in the dumpster. She even pulled out a photo of the dumpster from after she put it back for evidence. I don't know how you can smell hazardous materials through a photo, but whatever. I told them that I had my own video evidence and pulled out the video from my security camera. As the recording played, you could see the face of my neighbor go from a smug smile to a very nervous red face. She was finally caught in front of so many people that she had no way to get out of it. Even the other members of the HOA looked horrified at what she had done. To preserve the HOA and to save themselves from a lawsuit, she was kicked out of the HOA and soon the entire town knew about what she had done. I went up to her privately and handed her the bill from dumping the extra trash. I told her that she could pay me and be done with it, or I could take her to court and also charge her for trespassing, theft and dumping without a permit. She obviously wrote me a check to try and get herself out of any further trouble. The entire neighborhood despised her after that and started to fully shun her. Also, without her HOA protection, she was no longer allowed to keep her hair salon business out of her living room. Nobody wanted to talk to her, and whispers about her were always going around about how they couldn't believe somebody would do that to their neighbor. It was too much for her, and by the end of that year, I noticed a for sale sign on her property. I don't want to say that I am glad my actions caused her to be shunned out of the neighborhood, but I will say that I was glad she got what she deserved after constantly thinking that she was better than everybody else. The rules apply to everybody in a community, even the ones that have so-called power. If she had just acted like a responsible HOA board member and citizen, then there would have never been any problems. Outside of the HOA stuff, this woman did not really have anything else going on against her. She just abused her power to get things how she wanted, and it finally came back and bit her in the rear. I know that this can go one of two ways, where she goes to a new neighborhood and starts up the same old game she was playing, or she could learn from this and get a fresh start to be a better person. I know that the first option is more likely, but as much as I hated her, I hope she picks the second. I also hope that if she chooses to be an HOA neighbor from hell, her newest victim will be able to act a lot faster than I did to put her in her place. And yeah, Ripe Stars, time and time again, it seems like that people who really enjoy abusing power against others often find themselves in HOAs. Let me know in the comments if you would ever be willing to live in an HOA. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.